today's post-pandemic world, a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to save money on their ERP implementations. A lot of them were spending way too much money to begin with. Others are finding that the economic environment we're in today doesn't support that run rate. So I want to talk here today about is how to save money on your ERP implementation. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, a lot of organizations are feeling economic pain from the recent pandemic and the fallout economically. And as a result, a lot of organizations are looking for ways to tighten their belts and save money on their implementations. Other organizations were spending too much to begin with. They were letting their projects get out of control and spending a lot more than they needed to because of lack of governance and controls and other related things. And now's a great time to revisit. Why are we spending so much money on our implementation and how can we save some money? And though there's a fine line between not wanting to cut too many corners and not trying to cut too much money in the interest of longer term value, there definitely is a fine line and a balancing act that needs to happen. But what we often find is that organizations too often spend too much money more than they need to, and there's more deliberate and focused ways that companies can end up saving money. And I want to talk about those few things that you can do here today. Now, one of the first things you can do to save money on your project is to revisit your software license agreements. What is it you bought? What is it you planned on buying? Do you really need what you bought? Are there ways to renegotiate those costs if you already have a contract in place? Those are a lot of the questions that are very important to be asking yourselves now, especially if you're an organization that was unfortunate to see furloughs of employees or you've laid people off and maybe you don't need as many licenses as you once thought. If you're in the middle of an implementation, maybe you prematurely bought too many licenses. Now's an opportunity to look back and say, can we cut that back? And if you're in the fortunate position of just getting ready to negotiate software licenses, you're in the driver's seat. You have probably more leverage than you've had in a long time or may have in a long time. And it could be a great way to negotiate something that's very logical and ultimately saves you money in the long term. So regardless of where you are in the journey, it's really important to look at how can we save money on our software licensees? How can we sit down and work with our software vendors to share some of the pain, if you will, and share some of the cost savings that might need to happen. And that can be a first step of low-hanging fruit for organizations looking to save money. Now, the second thing to help save money on your implementation is to rationalize the use of outside consultants. That may sound strange coming from someone who is a consultant and owns a consulting firm, but what we find is a lot of organizations spend way too much money on outside consultants. The system integrator parks too many resources on their project. There's not enough accountability. There's not enough transparency into what those consultants are doing. So now is a really important time to take a step back and dig into your project and understand what's happening. What are all these consultants doing? How are we holding them accountable? And how do we ensure that we're getting the value that we need out of these consultants? And how do we ensure that we're managing them and getting the most effective use of them? So that's another way to look at this, is to don't just take at face value what you've been doing up until now. Let's look at ways that we can throttle back and make more strategic and deliberate and focused use of those outside consultants rather than overspending on outside consultants. The third thing that will help save money on a project is to conduct an overall risk assessment, a quality assurance assessment, really a phase gate review of wherever you are right now, and really reassess the landscape. Let's look at what we're doing well, what could we be doing better, and what can we do to optimize our costs going forward. Most importantly, what can we do to identify the risks that are going to cost us too much money later on? That's where a lot of companies get into trouble, is that they don't anticipate what those risks are going to be, they don't mitigate those risks, and they end up leading to more cost later down the line. So what we're doing for a lot of clients right now is conducting an overall project assessment, a quality assurance assessment, whatever you want to call it. And we look at 13 different areas, and we have a framework we can show you that highlights some of those things that we evaluate for companies and organizations across the world. And once you do that risk assessment, what you end up with is a remediation plan and an improvement plan to help identify ways that we can be more effective with our project, make sure that we realign with whatever our new strategy might be in this post-pandemic world, and also make sure that our overall strategy and cost run rate makes sense. So that's another way to ensure that you're saving money and not spending too much money, is to conduct an overall risk assessment of your project as it stands right now. Another thing organizations can do to make sure that they save money in the long term is to establish a business process blueprint. Even if you're far along in your project, and certainly if you aren't that far along in your project, either way, we want to make sure we have a strong business process blueprint before we start spending too much money on consultants. And if we're spending money on consultants right now, spinning our wheels with a system integrator, trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up, now's a perfect opportunity to scale back on those consultants, take a time out and look at what do we want our business processes to be, how do we want to standardize, how do we want to realign with the post-pandemic world or the new economy we're living in. Whatever it is, let's make sure we've got that blueprint in place, because once we have that blueprint and understand what we want our processes to be and how we want people's roles and responsibilities to evolve, then we can give better direction to the system integrator and make better use of those resources and ultimately save more time and money later on. So having that business process blueprint early on is a really important approach. Even if you're far along in your process, it's never too late to beef that up and add more augmentation to what you've already done, potentially in that business process area. Now, a lot of organizations go into their implementations without having a clear vision for what their transformation plan might be. They might have a clear ERP software implementation plan, but they don't have that broader, bigger picture view of how are we going to transform our business. And if you haven't done that, now's a great time to do it, because it's a great way to realign, as I mentioned before, realign with today's realities. And it's also a way to make sure that we're, again, deliberately spending where we need to on technology, not just spending for technology's sake, but spending because it's something that adds a lot of value to what our overall transformation plan and priorities are. It's also a great way to ensure that our project governance and our implementation plan on the technology side is aligned with what that transformation plan is. So really defining what is our overall transformation plan, what is our organizational people change plan within that, all of that can give us better use of resources and better use of budget going forward, which will ultimately save us money. Now, those are just a few things you can do to save money on your project. It's what we're helping a lot of our clients do as independent consultants in their transformations right now. But you also want to make sure you watch out for those things that you think might save you money, but actually aren't. They may actually cost you more money. Two examples that come to mind. One is large cloud contracts. A lot of companies expect or think that their cloud subscriptions are going to save them money in the long term. And what we found, the reality is that not in terms of what a salesperson will show you in a business case on paper, but in actual reality after implementation, we have yet to see any sort of material savings for organizations that are implementing cloud solutions. Now, it doesn't mean cloud solutions are bad. They certainly provide other benefits, intangible benefits, like the fact that you don't have to maintain the software, the hardware. You can get rid of some of your internal infrastructure. But the reality is you're going to spend more in an annual subscription fee than you would have paid with your on-premise solution for the most part and in general, because it's an ongoing subscription fee, much like leasing a car versus buying. So understand that you're not necessarily going to save money as a result of cloud, even if it is the right thing for you. The other thing to keep in mind or to watch out for that we see a lot is this whole concept of agile, the agile implementation approach. I've done a whole video about some of the downsides or dark sides of agile implementations. A lot of organizations mean well when they start with that agile mindset, but what it ends up doing for a lot of organizations is creating a lack of direction and wasted time and inefficient rework and things of that nature that actually end up costing a lot more money in the long term. So those are just two examples of things to watch out for. If something sounds like a silver bullet or is being presented to you as a silver bullet, it's probably not true, so you take it with a grain of salt. But those are some of the things you want to watch out for that might actually increase your costs over time. So the key here and the key takeaway in good times or bad times, strong economy or not, strong financial results or not, wherever you are in the journey, it's really important to, in general, find ways to optimize your spending on your ERP implementation. There's no need to overinvest in your project. You don't necessarily need to cut corners and underinvest, but more organizations than not spend too much time and money. And some of the things we talked about here today hopefully give you some advice on how to rethink and rationalize your ERP implementation cost. I've also included some links down below, some resources that will help you in your digital transformation journey. I encourage you to check those out. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're constantly putting out new content like this. And also provide any comments below. What are you doing to save money on your project? What have you seen to provide the most value for your organization? I'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks very much for listening here today. Hope you have a great day, and we'll chat with you soon.